Welcome back to It Tastes Like Burning. This is Matt.
This is Jesse.
And we finally have created a cheat sheet for me to be able to read. And obviously I'm struggling with that right now. But you can always reach out to us at ittasteslikeburningcast@gmail.com. You can find us at Twitter at itlbcast. And you can look for us on Reddit at itlbcast. And don't forget, we just created our first Patreon account. I think this is the second or third round of us actually having this critter. So if you'd ever like to reach out to us there, It Tastes Like Burning on Patreon. And as always, if you ever have any questions, concerns, comments, issues, complaints, litigation, or just frankly anything else that you feel like we've failed at, you can always reach out to us in any other method you want. And God forbid, we might actually try and get you on the podcast so you can disagree with us and show us how terribly stupid we are.
In fact, if you'll just write that message on a brick, we'll give you some addresses to throw them at.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Simple. So, Jesse, what do we got on the boilerplate today?
Well, there's a lot of chaos right now. We saw these guys in Ohio just get their teeth kicked in with a train derailment that's made national and international news. And, those events happen from time to time, that once-in-a-career event or that big, giant call that frankly, you're in over your head. And you realize it pretty quick usually. And they're out there, and it doesn't matter who you are, you're going to have that event.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing is it kind of goes back to what's an MCI, and the fire service is something that can pretty easily be overrun by the scope of a call. And we've said it in the past, and we'll say it now, not interested in armchair quarterbacking what happened in Ohio. As far as I'm concerned, those poor guys got their teeth kicked in and they dealt with what they had to deal with. And for that, they deserve credit. And that's a true catastrophe, particularly on the environmental side, and having to think about the tools, the equipment, the apparatus, the hazardous condition, the personnel, the PPE, the citizens, and by the way, your house and your wife and your kids and your pets and what it's going to do to your community. Yeah, it's real simple to just hammer the hell out of people and not take into consideration at the end of the day, those guys did the best they could and are doing the best they did. And they work with the resources they have, the training they acquired, and then more than likely, a lot of quick thinking off the seat of their pants and having to come up with some damn good ideas literally in the heat of action.
Yeah, and they're taking input from outside sources, and when you're thinking about the bad things that happen, sometimes those things are dictated by others. So
yeah, or they're completely out of your control.
Yeah.
I mean, what can you do about containing a hazard in a specific area and another company comes in and decides to light it on fire?
Yeah.
I mean, that's out of your control. You had nothing to do with that. Or if it spills into a waterway or whatever, right before we decided to talk about this, I'd sat down and wrote a real simple list of just some of the truly colossal calls that I've had that were easily impossible to handle by your own organization. And for us was a tornado. It was a very big tornado. It wasn't on the ground very long, but it was an EF4 and killed 6. And we had a lot of damage and a lot of work to do with that. We've had 8 very large structure fires of different types: commercial, industrial, hazardous materials, apartments. So we've had very large fires. We've had 2 very large wildland fires that I'd call in our county. Been to a lot of large wildland fires, but we've only had two really big ones in our county that we were directly involved with. And I mean, whatever your personal list is on this, the things that you're dealing with in there is the public, the membership, and ultimately your tools, apparatus, and equipment. And that's just what I threw down real quick. And there's obviously a lot more you're going to have to deal with in there, but those are just the three things out of the gate that you're going to have to deal with.
You know, and some of those things are they're big on a scale of geographically, or they're big on a scale of the amount of resources that it takes to mitigate it, or they're big on the scale of just the amount of damage and carnage that's around. So, and those are all three different things. They're completely different things. So that large scale, long duration event that lasts 2, 3, 7, 10, 14, 20 days, those events are taxing in other ways than the event that's just, short-lived, but there's a lot of carnage, or the event that's a day or two of a lot of resources and a lot of fire, right? So there's a lot of different perspectives on that stuff. So you get into that large wildland that lasts 5 or 6 days, and day one you're going to have, the troops are going to rally, and you're going to have more people than you knew you had. But day 5, guess what? They had to go make a living.
Yeah, or they're just exhausted.
That too.
They can't go anymore. I mean, hell, we had to deal with that last summer with grass fires, because we had a string of grass fires. Big one, really big one, really, really big one, then a big one locally, and then a whole bunch of real small ones right after the big one locally. And that was, I'll call it a 2-week shot. And by the end of that 2 weeks, people were literally sleeping in brush trucks, 14 days straight at McDonald's, or pizza.
Yeah, whatever crap was there.
Right, crackers and beef jerky. And again, it's a factor that you have to start considering in how to adequately take care of your people on scene that are exhausted, they're dirty, they're tired, and this simple thing of just getting them a hot meal that's remotely worth a crap makes a big difference.
Yeah, or just a shower.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that I think gets overlooked, and you talked about the public, but that's one of the things the public doesn't always realize. They just assume that, every 8 hours a new group of guys are showing up, and that's not the way it works.
Not on a wildland fire, for sure.
You got guys that literally stay there for days and days and weeks. I mean, when we went out west, and we were covering some big fires in West Texas that were, 100,000 plus acres. You'd literally go there and work for 24, 36 hours straight, and then go find a tree to nap under.
Right.
And eat. I will say they fed you good around there, because every homemaker in 9 counties showed up with pies and cakes and food and meatloaf, and you name it, it was there. You just had to go to the place to find it. But there was always good food. I had the best crawfish boil I've ever had at a giant wildfire. Yeah, they had to cancel the party, so they brought the food to the command post.
That'll work.
Yeah, awesome.
Oh, and the other thing I'm going to kind of add to this is, don't get me wrong, protocols and SOPs and SOGs have their place, but there's a certain point here where sometimes you don't get an option. You have to think out of the box. And it's not that it's always the right answer. It's not that it's the wrong answer. The question is can you come up with an answer? And for people that are kind of scratching their heads and thinking about this, so imagine a tornado. Imagine 300 houses on the ground. Imagine your double digit amount of total departments in the county showing up, and everyone in the little yellow dog and a red rain jacket showing up on scene. And then every department surrounding you shows up, and then everyone tries to talk on the radio at the same time.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Okay. Okay, fine. So you have multiple channels. Will they all still ultimately get on there? And when you have 2, 3, 400 people trying to all talk at the same time, or God forbid, just check on scene, but meanwhile you've got emergency traffic on on a major gas leak, what do? I mean, are you going to let this colossal gas leak keep going? Are you going to go ahead and just secure it? Are you going to evacuate the area? How are you going to evacuate the area? On and on and on. I mean, you don't really have an option of being like, hold on, let me get my SOPs out. Oh, it says you need to do this. Okay, that's great. You remembered exactly what you need to do. The radio's still not operable. Okay, fine. That's a system failure, and that's an agency failure. Whatever. That's not the circumstance. That's immediately right now. So what do you deal with? Do you deal with the victims that are injured from the tornado because you're the first fire truck that showed up on scene and everyone surrounded you? Do you deal with the gas leak? Do you deal with the power lines? What do you deal with? Obviously command structure and everything's going to fall into place on that. But at the end of the day, you still can't communicate.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to be able to occasionally think of something out of the box. Working structure fire. Whatever, it's multiple stories. It's a big building. You get lost inside and your radio doesn't work. Okay? It's not that you're an immediate threat, but it doesn't matter if you try and call for a mayday or not. It's obvious your radio traffic's not going out.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks get hung up in the world of everything always works all the time, and
Right.
and it doesn't. I mean, Murphy's there. He'll poke his head out around the corner and just grin at you nearly every chance he gets, right? He's there and he wants to wreak havoc on you. And we've talked about the box and being in and out of that box, and it's no different than what's got a lot of departments in trouble with their manpower and their finances and everything else, is because they never thought outside of that box for just half a second to come up with a better solution than what they've always done.
Yeah, well, and again, I mean, you can pull out the Googler, you can check your SOPs, you can check with an officer. No one's going to have an answer for everything. There is a certain point in some situation, scenario, time, place, event, where you are going to have to, for a lack of better words, wing it. Now, that doesn't mean that you're taking your best uneducated guess. Ideally, experience, training, background, proficiency, all these things are going to factor into it. But at the end of the day, you're still not going to have the time to directly sit there and say that, well, due to this extraordinarily unnormal circumstance, that the scene's going to stop and now we're going to have a tabletop exercise.
Yeah, time out, guys. Time out.
I mean, there's a certain amount of, well, hell, just look at how the U.S. Army operates, or the Marines, or any of them. There's an entire concept of, here's your objective. We're going to give you a general place to start from. Go get it done. And they give you the flexibility and the freedom to actually make those decisions when they need to be made.
Well, and you look at the Army and stuff like that too. If it's an offensive mission or something of that nature, there's days and weeks of planning that goes into that stuff, that they've worked through every conceivable, and I use that word because that's what they could think of, scenario that and fallback, but there's always that
I have a perfect one. Keep going, sorry.
That inconceivable one, right? That you can't make this stuff up if you had to.
Well, the raid on Osama bin Laden's lodging.
Yeah.
One of the best pilots on the face of the earth literally took the helicopter and landed on a fence.
Yeah.
They're screwed. Talk about screwed up an entire operation. It's not like they ran up to bin Laden and gave him a timeout sticker and said, "Hey, you bad man, we're going to be back next week."
Yeah. Hang tight. We'll be here. We've got you.
It's an extreme circumstance other than the fact that it literally happened and they had to figure out a solution right then and there. And I realize there's kind of a stretch in trying to compare that to East Palestine, Ohio. Same thing. Don't think those guys weren't trained for that. They were. Okay? They had the tools. They had the equipment. And then it turned out that it actually happened.
Yeah.
That's a different thing.
Well, and we're all guilty of that'll never happen here and blah, 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 blah. That the old adage of plan for the worst and hope for the best. And that certainly rings true more times than you can really count, because those guys planned for the worst and hoped for the best, and then the worst actually happened.
Right.
And no matter how much you plan for the worst, you didn't plan enough. There's going to be things that come up there that are just that inconceivable. Inconceivable! The ode to the Princess Bride there, but it happens. I've seen the craziest things in the industrial settings where, it's like a bad movie, like a bad action movie where, you've got this thing over here on fire and the guy's telling you if it gets, 300 degrees hotter, it's going to explode. And, the plant personnel's telling you that, and you're looking at it and you're scratching your head. And then 14 hours later, the relief crew from the plant comes in and they turn the gas off to it and it stops.
Right.
And it's literally a crapshoot sometimes on that stuff. Yeah, you can flow a lot of water on it, but if the gas is still on and it's still burning inside of it, because that's what it's supposed to do, you could dump a lake on it. It doesn't matter. It's still going to burn.
Right. Well, this comes from my aviation side. Major accidents don't just happen. Airplanes don't just fall out of the air. There's a series of events that had to happen. And think of the multiple barriers in place to prevent that accident from happening. So you have training, you have checklist, you have maintenance personnel, you have pre-flights, you have dispatchers, on and on and on. Okay? But those walls, those preventative barriers, when they start to have accidents and breakdowns in them, they look like holes in Swiss cheese. The crew wasn't rested enough. A maintenance guy's having a bad divorce. The dispatcher was late to work and was rushed. And, on and on and on. And what happens is all these events start to line up. And you have just a 1 in a million, 1 in a billion odds that everything perfectly stacked up. And all the preventative measures that should have been in place to prevent that event from happening, it happened. Yeah. And, we don't really have control of showing up. I mean, we wouldn't exist if the accident never happened. That's what we're there for, is for after the accident. And same concept. There's only so much you can do in so much amount of time and review and prep and train and still not be prepared for a certain event. And again, this is where I'm going to rely on experience, resources, to a certain extent, protocols. What's the general recommendation? Don't be afraid to phone a friend. But at the end of the day, you don't necessarily have the luxury of taking 30 minutes per option. There's a whole bunch of things that all have to happen at the same time.
Yeah, I was gonna bounce into the train derailment scenario just because I've been to a couple of train derailments, and you would be shocked to understand how many train derailments actually happen.
Oh, it's
So
it's thousands.
it's
Yeah,
staggering. But you've got to look at a train derailment like a traffic accident on the road out here.
right.
So there's tons of them that happen where it's a fender bender, which like one of the one of the bogies or whatever they call them slips off and it's just there, and they pick the car up and set it back on, and it happened at 2 miles an hour and it's no big deal. Well, I went to one time in a plant, and it's on the spur line where it's just moving cars around and filling cars and whatnot, and they move cars there all the time. They have a little miniature locomotive that moves a handful of cars, not like a big train. And they probably had one derailment a week at this place where it's just, somebody pushed the car off the end of the track, or there's a derail device there to actually force a derailment to keep a train car from going to where it wasn't supposed to go, and they'd bump into it too fast or whatever. Well, one day they had a derailment out there, and we got called to it. And we never got called to these things. This is a new event. Well, the car slid off. The derail device did its job, but the wheels were resting on a 4-inch gas line.
Mm.
It didn't break anything, but this 4-inch gas line's holding this rail car up. That's what's supporting the weight of the rail car. And I mean, there's nothing for us to do there except for stand by and look pretty and hope that this thing doesn't just give way and rip in two, and then we've got to deal with that. Of course, we find the shut off and get it shut off and do all that stuff in the early stages of the incident, and there's really nothing for us to do after that. But those things happen all the time, and it's just like the accident on the highway, or just like the winter storm here a few years ago when, what was it, 300 car pileup or whatever it was there in Fort Worth that I can't remember how many cars were in that wreck. It was a bunch.
It was a lot.
It was a lot. Well, that's the equivalent, and it happens once in a blue moon. But the fender benders happen every day.
And we said it earlier. I just want to go back to it. There's nothing wrong with sitting down, looking at an event, and critiquing it for the benefit of learning, whether introspectively or retrospectively, that affects your organization or your neighbors or whatever. But just blindly blasting someone or an agency or an entity or a department or whoever, for the lack of better words, because it feels good, you've accomplished nothing there. And being able to take any event and utilize, realize, implement that event possibly in the old resource toolbox for the next one. That's a big thing. There's a lot of, I think, in emergency services that's not being prepared for everything. It's just making sure that you do all the small, simple things right and get them established out of the gate, and then let the special circumstances of the event take accordance then.
Well, yeah, because you've got to rely on that, and you mentioned it a while ago, the knowledge and the skills and the all those things that you've built over a period of time, whatever that period of time is, that lead you to hopefully the right answer. I mean, it's not an uneducated guess, and it may be an educated guess at some points in time, but you're not relying on smoke and mirrors or a book. You're relying on intuition, knowledge, skills, the things that you've developed over a period of time. Does that mean that your 6 month rookie is a guy to be in charge of a train derailment? Absolutely not.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, that's not what that means. That guy's in charge of the hydrant, right?
Right.
You kind of got to earn that place and develop that skill set. But with developing that skill set, you should be developing critical thinking skills, knowledge. Uh, I'm looking for a word to describe it, but it's the ability to think, problem solving, because we're problem solvers. That's what we're here for. It may not be our problem, but we're solving somebody's problem. We're problem solvers. We're not monkeys with an axe.
Yeah, it's I mean, like I said, reference the SOPs. Okay, you got those memorized, real good. So think about the last time that you had a major train derailment in your district, and it was on the level of even a remote percentage of what Ohio's having to deal with. I mean, the last truly colossal, really bad train derailment that I can remember in the U.S. was a runaway train in California coming down the San Bernardino Mountains. Brakes gave out on the train and it came plowing into San Bernardino. That's the last truly bad train derailment that I can think of in the U.S. Now, there's been some Amtrak derailments with a higher loss of life, but from a environmental and economic impact, that San Bernardino train derailment, God, I think that was in the 80s.
Yeah.
Maybe in the earlier mid 90s. So we're talking 30, 35, maybe 40 years ago.
Well, and it's no different than the Exxon Valdez
Right.
or any of those events like that Texas City, Deepwater Horizon, any of those things like that.
Big earthquake.
Yeah.
You know the big LA earthquake. Don't think for a second that those crews weren't improvising and adapting and literally coming up with ideas off the just hair of their butt, because they ran into so many unique, terrible situations, but at least everyone around them needed help.
Yeah. And I've got a tornado story, and it's a story that was passed down to me, and I wasn't around for this tornado. I didn't make this call. Predates me, but so it's F5, kind of in the middle of nowhere, rural part of Texas, and so fire crews go and they start responding to all these places, trying to help, and a lot of the communications are, I mean, because everything's wiped out in an F5. I mean, it's just bare dirt for the most part. Well, they find a concrete garage that still the walls are intact. You know, it's a cinder block CMU type building. You know, roof's gone and whatever, but this concrete garage is intact, and they hear people in it. So they dig through the rubble. There's a 2x4 that has gone through the garage, through the concrete block garage, into the vehicle, and is impelled through a man's chest and through the seat of the truck, and has him literally pinned in there. And this was something like a 3 or 4 hour ordeal to get this guy out of this garage in this car, because he's not only in a motor vehicle accident, he's in a motor vehicle accident inside of a garage, inside of a tornado stricken area, with a 2x4 impelled through the vehicle, through the garage, into him, you know. And that's insane. How does that come up? How do you dream up something like that?
Right. And then having to deal with, one, resources are probably already limited in that scenario, much less the crew that found him. Did they have the truck with the equipment to even try and take a whack at it?
Where this was, they were in a brush truck.
Yeah. So, I mean, There's a whole bunch of planning and strategizing, and the really basic thing of taking care of the public, or in this case, your patient, can't be forgotten. You got a whole bunch of other crap going on, but you still got the guy with the board through his chest.
Yeah. But fortunately, he's trapped under rubble and pinned to a vehicle.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, it just is. It's those big events, top to bottom. I mean, I can tell you from a Chiefs perspective, sometimes we show up to this stuff and we're just like, holy crap, where do I begin? And then you begin.
Yeah. Well, it's eating the elephant, right?
Right.
You know, you just got to take it one bite at a time. Unless you got enough people, and then you might bite on it from both ends and hope you get to the middle faster.
It's just, I get weird about the armchair quarterbacking stuff because I don't see the benefit of it. It just and I don't I one thing I'm not a personal fan of is approaching any emergency scene like it was the last one. I've never once been to two structure fires that they're exact carbon copies of each other. I mean, same for the car accidents and on and on. And yet we approach everything. I've seen this happen where people are so rigid in their routine that they won't accommodate, recognize, realize that hey, you need to be jumping ahead in your plan here to be addressing this other actual major hazard right now. But by God, we're going to stretch the right hose for it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I said, it's one of those things that just you need to be a little more flexible to that and being able to adapt and improvise and take action.
Yeah, just thinking. And so when I was young, we hunted a lot of rattlesnakes. So you'd have a box in the back of your pickup, and there might be 1, 10, 40, 200 rattlesnakes in this box in the back of your truck. And it's got a stick holding the lid shut, so it's secured. What would have happened if we would have crashed? Well, what would have happened to the firemen that showed up to help us, or the cops or the EMS personnel when the box of rattlesnakes opened up and spread rattlesnakes all around? And it was not uncommon to literally have 50 or more rattlesnakes in this box. And it was not just me. There was 4 or 5 of us that rolled around like this. And that so far out of left field to even conceive that could be a thing. But trust me, in the 90s, that was a thing in my pickup.
Install flamethrowers on the trucks.
Yeah. Just totally out of the box, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I know we're kind of bouncing all over the place on this today, and there's a lot of just subjective, personal opinion on it. It's just, like I said, reacting a little bit to what I've seen on the news and a little bit what I've seen on YouTube and read and reading comments and seeing in other social media spaces. Oddly enough, Reddit has been relatively mild, and I think a lot of that has to do with young or old. I think a lot of people realize that entire just diabolical disaster, really the fire department just had to help with dealing with the colossal mess after the derailment. So when you actually talk to direct fire crews, you see them not nearly pulling out the baby seal club like other entities would, or you'd see like on YouTube or something like that.
Oh yeah. Well, the media, they went from experts in the Ukraine war to experts in hazmat and train derailment in 37 seconds, right?
Right.
And despite all their expertise, they still don't have a clue what the hell.
Yeah, it's And I don't know really how you would tabletop that specific experience. Now, all that said, the truth is I really haven't read that much into the derailment. Everything that I've read has been more on news after the derailment, and actions taken by politicians and by companies and by agencies. So,
But the memes, most of the memes have been really good.
some of them have been top notch,
Spot on memes. Yeah.
high quality memes.
Yes. Yeah. I saw one today that had a picture of it in the background, said, "Remember the rule of thumb."
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very applicable here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. That's a huge call, and don't think for a second that you can't have a major call like that, whether it be fire or chemical or accident or whatever. I mean, you can even get into the other side of that. Here's kind of a wild one with your public shootings.
Yeah.
You know, that can get people in big trouble pretty quick, especially if you're not necessarily acting in any capacity of a on the job, but you're maybe there just enjoying the event. And you don't have to have a public shooting to have a big old mass casualty incident. You could have weather shift on you really quick or something else, and you're going to be left in the same situation where you're the first on and you have no resources, but there sure is a lot of people hurt. And it's going to take some pretty quick thinking on your part at how to handle the crowds and stuff like that.
Oh, I got sidetracked.
It's all right. It's been known to happen.
But yeah, don't beat them to death. That's a good lesson here. And I don't think those guys over there deserve to get beat to death on any of that.
No, yeah, I think that's the best way to say it. If anything, give them an opportunity to take a nap. And if you ever did have the opportunity to talk to them, don't ask them, "Why'd you do this?" The question to ask is, "Would you learn?"
Yeah. And have you moved yet?
Yeah. There's that.
Yeah, there is that. Well, we're plenty far into it.
Okay, let's call it a night. And again, I'm going to go through the old read-off list. Thanks to everyone that's reached out to us with questions, and thanks if you're still listening. We really do appreciate it. You can always reach out to us with any questions you have at ittasteslikeburningcast@gmail.com. Again, reach us at Twitter at ITLBcast. Find us on Reddit at ITLBcast. And lastly, our Patreon, if you're ever interested in that. And if anyone does jump into that pool, we have stickers.
We have stickers, yeah.
We have stickers. So, again, thanks for everything, guys. This is Matt.
This is Jesse.
Have a good evening.